Hi everyone, this is Kevin Bernatz from Dr. Beernuts Development. Again, taking a break from rule proofing while I'm still groggy from getting over the flu. So this is the second video on Line of Judah by Compass Games. Just going to show a little bit of one of the rules in Line of Judah that came up in a recent play test. I think demonstrates the rule pretty neatly and does a good job showing just some of the little quirks that Javier has built into the system. To give a little historical background, Christmas of 35, 36, that time, the winter, December, January time period, the Ethiopians launched what they called their Christmas offensive, and basically up and down the lines they attacked the Italian defenders, mostly with not much to show for it. Again, the Italians were a more modern army, more artillery, more tanks, better aircraft, more supplies, etc. And even though the Ethiopians certainly had bravery on their side, the grand offensive that they launched ended up bleeding them dry, which eventually led to the collapse that saw the rest of their country taken. The way Javier has this designed in the game is once per game between turns 2 and 6, the Ethiopian player can launch the grand offensive. And it has several special effects. First, normally each leader, you can see these different leaders. This is, Ras Imru. Here's Ras Kasa. Here's Prince Tafari. You have Ras Mahel. And then you have the Negus, the king. And each of these individual leaders, and there's leaders in the south as well, but just going to look at the north here. Each of these leaders activate individually. So you activate a leader, see if they can move. Pull that up. So you roll on this activation table. 2 or less, there's no activation. It basically means the units can only move 1 hex and they can't attack. On a 3, it's half activation. So the leader and half the other units can move full movement. Everyone else only gets to move 1 hex and can't attack. And then on a 4 or higher, it's full activation. There's one tribe, Ras Imru, can get up to a 7, which gives them a +1 on any combat they're involved in. And so you don't know how well the unit's going to be able to move each turn. You don't know which tribes are going to get full activation or not. The exception, there's 2 exceptions. One is an event chip that essentially allows you to play it on a single leader and say, okay, full activation. The other is this grand offensive, which you designate either the north or the south, and all the leaders are full activation and they all get to move simultaneously. Or more like the Italian player, a conventional, hex encounter game where you move all your units in whatever order you want. You don't have to, move all of the Ras Imru units, then all the, you sort of can move a couple of them, and then so on and so forth. And since the tribal fractions can't stack with each other or cross each other's hexes, this is important when you're sort of got a situation here. These light green colored units, they are actually Italian colonial regulars. So these are tribes that either came up in revolt against the king, against Ethiopia, or tribal levies that they brought in from Eritrea. And so these units are actually Italian units. So you can see the Ethiopian players have sort of this F shape where the Italians have reached the sides and are trying to take these hexes here. Hide the pieces. So these Amba hexes, you see this path. These are the 2 paths that lead to Addis Ababa, and supply and artillery, called resource points, pretty much have to travel along these paths. So these Amba hexes block those paths, and they're very hard to take for the Italian player. So they've been pushing to sort of come around and battle on these Amba hexes. And they snuck in some of these colonial regulars behind the lines. So the Ethiopian player decided to launch his grand offensive. And so he basically gets to move all of his units. So he moves up the king and moves to different tribes. Now, in addition to allowing all the tribes to activate simultaneously, it also gives a 2-column shift in their advantage to any combat. They're inspired warriors, and they're going to have a much greater chance of inflicting losses on the enemy when they're launching their grand offensive. However, all losses on their side go up by 1, so they're going to get a minimum of 1 loss no matter what. And they have to launch a minimum of 3 attacks. So if they do a grand offensive and launch less than 3 attacks, for every attack under 3, it's going to cost them 2 victory points. So you could declare a grand offensive and launch no attacks. It's going to cost you 6 victory points. You do gain extra reinforcements for that. So there's, if you feel like the extra reinforcements will save you more than 6 victory points, perhaps it's worth it. But most of the time when you launch the grand offensive, your goal is going to be to inflict step losses on the Italians. And part of that can be a situation like this, where you have this really messed up front line and you need to do something to address that. And the other part can be the fact that Italian step losses count as victory points against the Italian player. So for every 2 step losses the Italian player loses, that's a -1 victory point. So if you're able to inflict 3-4 step losses during the grand offensive, that's a couple victory points that you've taken away from the Italian player. So let's see what the Surge. So you can see they've got 3 attacks. They have the Showa tribe, the red tribe attacking here. They have the Ras Kasa and some of the Ethiopian Imperial Guard attacking here. And then Prince Tafari and some of the Imperial Guard attacking here. I think actually he changes one of these guys to help out. Yeah, they basically have 3 attacks. And I'm just going to quickly go through. Net effect is that you have, let's show you the CRT. Ethiopians have their own CRT. That's a different CRT than the Italian CRT. Let's go pull that up. Real easy to get them side by side here, but you could sort of look. You have 3-0 results on the 1 to 3, 4-0. 2-0, 2-1 on a 2 to 1. More 2 to 1s up here, 2-2. In general, the Ethiopian CRT is much bloodier to the attacker. If you look at 3 to 2 odds, 2 to 1 odds, pretty much anything but a 6 is going to inflict a loss on the attacker. And you get, a 1/3 chance of taking 2 losses. Remember, for the grand offensive, you're increasing losses by 1. So even on the highest column, on a grand offensive, you can that roll and get a 1, you have a chance of taking 3 losses. So the Ethiopians get bloodied up when they attack, but they also have a good chance of inflicting step losses on the Italians. Now, unlike on the Italian CRT, if you look, you're not going to inflict 2 step losses until you get to the 4 to 1, unless you're able to get that +1 and you roll 6 on the 3 to 1. Otherwise, really, you're dinging them. Okay, it's, depth of 1,000 pinpricks. You're going to inflict 1 loss, maybe get a resource point. That's what the +R is on this CRT. But if you're able to get up to the 4-1, then you have the chance of really doing some damage. Now remember, the grand offensive, you start 2 column shifts. They only have to end up at 2 to 1 to get up on that 4 to 1 plus table. So what happened here was, they're attacking these different hexes, and they end up getting 4 to 1s here. And They have a +1 for being concentric, and they also have +1 because they're attacking from or into mountains. It's terrain that favors, hand-to-hand close combat, and that favors the Ethiopians, so they gain a +1 DRM when attacking to or from mountain hexes. They basically know the local terrain a lot better than the Italian player. And no other terrain effects apply. In my other video I mentioned, rough terrain is a column shift in the defender's favor. Well, that's on the Italian CRT, not on the Ethiopian CRT. The only terrain effects that apply for the Ethiopians are if they're attacking across a river or attacking into one of these Amba hexes. Then they get the terrain effects associated with the Amba or the river, but otherwise they ignore all the other terrain effects. So the Surge, I'm just going to quickly go through, amazingly successful. I mean, they still take losses, every attack, minimum of 1 loss. But what they did was they managed to address their lines. And so this one ended up being 16 to 6, so 2 to 1. Again, shifts up that magic 4 to 1. So depending where they roll, they could inflict 2 or 3 losses on the Italian. And let's see what they rolled, a 5, +1 for the mountain. They didn't have concentric, so everyone's attacking only no one on the other side. So still 2-step losses. That's going to increase these Italian steps eliminated. That's a whole nother victory point lost by the Italian player because of the Grand Offensive. Now it's a 0-2, but again, because of the Grand Offensive, it's actually a 1-2. And so after the Grand Offensive, that's what his line now looks like. Much better than what it looked before. He managed to seal up the front. He managed to get, now he's going to get reinforcements in before the Italian player gets to move, because the sequence of play is, first player phase, which in this 35-36 scenario is Italians. Then the second player phase, which is the Ethiopians. So green is 35-36, first player Italian, second player Ethiopian. And then it's the end of turn. And then in the main administration phase, that's where you get reinforcements. And so they're going to be able to reinforce some of these hexes before the Italian can come and whack on them. So that Grand Offensive really helped seal up this line. Was looking like a really bad situation for him because of that rule. And again, luckily he hadn't used it. This was turn, I guess it was turn 3. So he didn't use it in turn 2, and he was able to use it in turn 3 and really solidify his line. And that's kind of what it's there for. It's there that if the Italian player gets cocky or over aggressive, then the Ethiopian player can really put a hurting on it. So it's another little quirk that Javier has in the game that captures some of the historical nuances that occurred in this conflict. And hopefully you've enjoyed seeing about these, and hopefully if you find this era and these battles interesting, you go to Compass Games and pre-order it. Thank you.